So, Paul, you interviewed me last time we spoke for your very funny podcast series, and you were a very good interviewer and could give me some very good lessons. But anyway, here we are again, and this time it's me with the questions, one Brummie to another. That's Birmingham born, for anybody who doesn't know. And what I really want to talk to you about is your wonderful production for Told by an Idiot, Charlie and Stan, which is running at Wilton's Music Hall from January the 18th to February the 4th as part of next year's London International Mime Festival. I'm going to get to the question in a minute, so stay with me. You created the show for our festival first time around in 2020, and it was a huge hit, a memorable production, and we're delighted that you're going to do it again as part of Told by an Idiot's 30th anniversary celebrations. Many congratulations on that, by the way. And it's coincidentally the final edition of the Mime Festival. So, Charlie Chaplin and Stan Laurel, two of the greatest ever comic actors, British born, but who made their names in America and are still superstars more than a century later. We know they traveled together from Britain to America as young unknowns, sharing a cabin, or that's the story. Can you tell us if they really did and what happened next?
Well, thank you, Joseph. Yes, they really did travel from Britain to America as two young performers in Fred Karno's music hall troupe. Karno's troupe was the kind of superstars of their day in terms of music hall, performing all around Britain and Paris and America. Chaplin was already established in the group, and Stan joined slightly later. One of Stan's jobs, as well as doing bits and pieces, was to understudy Chaplin. Now, Chaplin had already established himself in quite a big way in the company with an act where he played a drunken aristocrat falling in and out of a box. But Fred, you might relate to this, Joseph, I don't know, but Fred Karno was an impresario who was very tight with the purse strings, kept a tight hold of them.
No relation.
Chaplin went to Karno about 10 minutes before the show was up in Darlington one night and said, "I need to be paid more money, Mr. Karno." Mr. Karno said, "Nonsense, Charlie, that's all we can afford." At which point Chaplin called his bluff and walked out. At this point, the young Stan Laurel was forced into the costume of the aristocrat and pushed on stage. Now, 50 or 60 years later, Stan Laurel talked about this moment and said it was obviously nerve-wracking, made all the more nerve-wracking because when he came on and was doing the act, in about the third row, Chaplin was sitting there leaning forward, watching the young Stan. And I think they, from what we can gather, they did share this cabin and they were part of his troupe as they set off there. What drew me to the show, and I think this maybe tells you something about both of them, is and to this true story, is that Stan talked about Charlie all his life. Even as an old man on his deathbed, he talked about Chaplin as the greatest clown of us all. When you read Chaplin's autobiography, he doesn't mention Stan once anywhere.
Well,
so I was quite intrigued by this.
Tragic, isn't it? It's really sad, I think.
It is, but I think it kind of. We talked about the show being about the double act, the greatest double act that never was.
Yes.
It's a bit spurious because, in a sense, Chaplin was never going to be in a double act. He wasn't going to share it with anybody. No. I think that drive that coming from this terrible Victorian childhood sent him on going, "No, I'm going to, word has it that when they arrived in New York or they sailed in, Chaplin stood on the side of the boat shouting, 'America, I've come to conquer you.'" So, he wasn't short in the ego space. But yes, all of that is true. Then they spent time in America, again, sharing rooms, touring around. And then I think legend has it that Stan got a bit homesick and decided to return home. And then Chaplin got an invitation from this newfangled thing called the movies and went out to Hollywood. But yes, I think we've created, I would say, a true fantasy, I would call it. So based on fact, but descending into moments of hopefully very entertaining fantasy.
Can I just, it's a complete tangent. You mentioned Fred Karno's circus. That's sort of become a sort of a, not a popular, but it's become a well-known expression, hasn't it? Fred Karno's circus. What does it mean? Does it actually mean something that's chaotic or?
Well, that's what that's what I kind of thought. My dad used to sometimes use that expression. Used to say when he came home from work, said this place is like Fred Karno's. So it clearly, I think, was in popular culture as a way of describing a very chaotic place of mayhem.
No, I don't think you ought to go any further with that. And so I'm sure your house was one of incredible orderliness and sobriety. But anyway, yes. So listen, it's an absolutely fascinating story. When you first presented this in 2020, the reviews were absolutely wonderful, and quite rightly so, because it is a great show. Have you sort of modeled it? You've recast it. Well, this time, as last time, interestingly, you cast a female actor in the role of Charlie. Why was that, actually? Is it?
I have re-looked at the show. Inevitably, you do when you come back to it. I'll come to that in a second. But the casting, I think, was quite pivotal for me, because it wasn't just Chaplin; it was also Stan. I had no interest in trying to find two performers that could do an impersonation of these extraordinary. That for me felt completely pointless. And then the more I kind of looked at Chaplin and his performance and particularly his movement quality, I thought it'd be really interesting if we could find the right woman to play it. And also just to take the pressure off the role in a way, in some way, where the audience kind of maybe accept that it's a woman playing Chaplin, and then they forget it's a woman and they remember it's a woman throughout the show. So some of it was around that kind of movement quality that I was searching for. It also allowed us, we didn't realize this, but I think it allowed us to go further in certain moments. So you might remember there's a moment in the show where Chaplin is alone on stage, and I was interested in exploring the kind of charisma of the little tramp figure. And in our show, Chaplin gets eye contact with the woman in the audience and starts to flirt with her. Of course, there's no words; it's completely silent. And then Chaplin indicates he can't come to her because there's literally an ocean between them. At which point he sits down and he mimes a fishing rod and throws it out to this woman and reels this woman in, and she comes up on stage and swims with Charlie Chaplin. Now, I remember being quite nervous about this idea. I think, we're really going to get someone out of the audience who's going to come on stage and swim with Charlie Chaplin? And every night we did, every night. And I think something of that is to do with the fact that if it had been a man playing Charlie, I think that might have met with more resistance. I mean, I imagine an audience member might have gone, oh, hang on, they're going to make fun of me. But something about it being a woman playing Charlie gave that license to go, oh, I'm in safe hands. And so I think it's that. And I think and the same with, I've got the wonderful Jerome Marsh Reed, a mixed race actor playing Stan, and he has all the spirit of Stan without trying to be Stan. And I think that's the liberation, really.
Yeah, I think it's terribly clever the way you've thought that through. And I remember from 2020, both actors playing Charlie and Stan were completely brilliant. Now, Stan is the same actor, I think, isn't it? And Charlie is different. Have you found somebody, to reproduce your original Charlie, or is it brilliance but in a different way?
I'd say it's more the latter. And I, as an actor, whenever I've had to take over in something, I've always dreaded it when the director says to you, well, you see, what the last bloke did was this. So obviously there is a structure which we're returning to, but it's more how that performer, Danny, meets Charlie in a sense. And I think it's interesting, the show as a whole, because we took it out last year with the West End impresario producer, David Pugh. And the show ran at about 90 minutes, I think. And we were doing a run through the rehearsal room, and David rather cannily said to me, how long is it? And I said, it's about 90 minutes. He said, do you think we could cut anything? And I remember thinking, blimey, it's only 90 minutes. How short do you want it to be? Yeah. And then he said, how long are Chaplin's films? The main films, Gold Rush and Tito. And I said, I don't know. And I went and looked at them, and they were 80 minutes. Yeah. And I thought, I think he might be right.
I think that's why he's a very successful producer. It can't just because he was trying to save on electricity, but
no, I don't know. But anyway, I took his advice, and as a result, I think it exists very purely now as a theatrical version of the silent movie, in the same sort of length as those Chaplin movies as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Can I just talk about the venue? Wilton's Music Hall, simply wonderful historic venue in the City of London. It was, as you know, formerly a variety hall, the sort of place where Charlie and Stan might well have started their careers, but didn't. What does it mean to you to be performing there?
Well, Wilton's for me is one of London's unique venues, and I think when you've got the right kind of material, which we have, it's kind of perfect. It kind of felt like there was no other choice. When we came to London, it had to be there. I think it does feel like going back in time. I think it's amazing the way they've managed to preserve that space and the authenticity of it. And then when you put something like Charlie and Stan in there that sits so beautifully in it, it kind of slightly transforms you or transports you in, I suppose, in a way. And I think, of course, we have no idea. I remember someone saying, there was some theory that perhaps Chaplin's father performed at Wilton's, and obviously I leapt on that, whether it was true or not, that Charlie's dad played there. So I think you can't deny that sense of heritage in it. It's not a space that I think, for my money, particularly lends itself to plays with lots of words. It's great with music and for our piece as well, with the physicality of it. But it's kind of wonderful, and it'd be great to bring it back.
Yeah. No, it's fabulous. We feel we're very lucky to have it as a festival venue, and it's suited, despite the fact that you're quite right. I mean, it wasn't made as a place to have dramatic works, but I thought it worked beautifully first time around in 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and I'm sure it will do just as well this time. Just moving on for a second, you're one of the founders of Told by an Idiot, 30 years now. You've toured all over the world with the company, as well as having carved out a very successful career for yourself. Mentioned as an actor, a fine actor, a tragedian, a comedian, and most recently, I thought, well, I don't know if it was most recently, but recently, stealing the show in a, extremely brief appearance at the beginning of a TV film about that odd young man who became assistant to Lou Macari as manager of, and I can't remember the name of the football club to my shame.
Stoke City.
Stoke City, there it is. I mean, so it's a real story. So, can I just ask you, do you have a favourite role in your long and distinguished career? And if so, was it your best?
I don't know. In terms of Told by an Idiot, of course, the many times I was lucky enough to perform with the great Hayley Carmichael, of course, it was a joy, and always totally unpredictable with it being Hayley. Other things, I suppose, within Told by an Idiot that I feel really proud to have been part of and been on stage with was a show called My Perfect Mind that we did with the great Edward Peffenbridge, which was me and Edward together and Catherine directing. I suppose in terms of other shows or stuff I've done when I've been on stage in other contexts, I really enjoyed taking over for a while in the play What I Wrote with our old friends, The Right Size. That was enormous fun. And I'm thinking of them now, actually, because we're here to wonderfully asking me questions to promote the show. I remember them doing you'll remember this show. They did a brilliant show, amongst many, called Stop Calling Me Vernon.
Yeah.
And they presented it at the Edinburgh Festival. And they said to me, we've been offered a slot at 11 o'clock at night. Do you think we should take it? And I said, well, if anyone can fill a crowd at 11 o'clock, I think you two could. So they went there, and on the first or second show, there's about 30 people in the audience. And we roared with laughter, these 30 people, at midnight. And at the end, they stepped forward, and Hamish said to the audience, ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed tonight's performance, keep it to yourself. And it was the best bit of public. And I don't know if it was essentially had their success, but from then on they sold out. So it was a very brilliant way of selling the show. Yes. I have to ask you a quick question, can I?
You can ask me a slow one. It gives me more time to think about it.
Okay. Well, obviously, you touch on it so lightly as you do with all your achievements. But I have to say, I sit here talking to you and hugely looking forward to being in the festival. But as you said yourself, you brought it up, the final festival, and it's been, I was talking to John Wright the other day, who I think may have been in and around even your very, very first or very early festivals.
Very early. That
age. Yes. And I just think it's an extraordinary thing that you and Helen have created. I'll say it many times over January, I wanted to say a huge thank you. I really do. I mean this very genuinely, from not just from our company, but from lots of generations of British performers who were trying to do something a little bit different and not always finding it easy to get work seen, and you've absolutely championed that, Joseph. So I
But
have to
thank
ask
you for that very, very nice. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, now look, back to you.
Yes.
Do you think Aston Villa will ever win anything again in our lifetime?
I have very high hopes of Mr. Emery, who has obviously taken over. I know we say that every time. I was at the Chelsea home game with my daughter, which was Gerrard's penultimate home game. And I, along with many other thousands, were of the belief that something had to change, and it has changed.
Well,
and I think
you
he's
weren't saying you're going to get the sack in the morning. I can't.
No, I don't promote that kind of material. But we have got a good manager now, and I really hope so. I really, really hope so.
Yes.
But
well, I share that view. I can't understand why we stuck with Gerrard for so long. But anyway, and before we return to Charlie and Stan, what are you hoping to get for Christmas this year?
What am I hoping to get? I haven't really given it a lot of thought.
This was Helen's question, by the way.
I know, it's a good question. I'm glad she's asked me, because it's provoked me to think about all the stuff I haven't done yet for anybody else. But it's good to focus on myself, of course, more crucially. I think I'm after a new coffee pot of something a bit boring, but I'm in need of something like that. I was also quite intrigued by a book. You'll know this, knowing London as you do. I went to see the Lucian Freud exhibition on Friday evening, and I was looking at a book that intrigued me, which was about the history of the Colony Room. You know, that particular club in.
I'm proud to say I've never been there, which is probably why I'm still alive.
Exactly. And I thought, I don't mind dipping into some of that material over the Christmas break.
Yes.
But we'll see. We'll see. That'll do. A coffee pot and a trip down to the Colony Room in book form.
What was his name? The bloke who ran it was called. The last one was called Belcher or something, wasn't it? I was remember.
Yeah, she's a woman.
Well, no. Was that Muriel Belcher?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yes. And then she gave it to Ian Ford.
That's it.
Yes. Anyway, of course, I don't know anything about it, and I've never.
No, you wouldn't possibly know anything about that.
No, and I think a coffee pot. I think we can do better than that. But anyway, I'll leave that to you.
If my family watch this, they might get the hint.
So look, I'm going to leave you in peace now, but we're very much looking forward to this, to your show, Charlie and Stan, as part of the festival. I want to thank you very much indeed for sharing your 30th anniversary with us. If you could give us one good reason for coming to see it, apart from the fact that it's wonderful, I'll be very happy to finish.
The one good reason why I think I'm going to reference Graham Greene, a novelist I really like, where I saw a poster for one of his first edition books, copy of Brighton Rock, and on the front cover it says Brighton Rock, an entertainment by Graham Greene. And I think one reason to come is this is a really, really great piece of entertainment.
Well, I second that. It's fresh in my memory, and I know it's going to remain there, and it's going to improve even this time, the second time round. So I urge everybody to come and see it, whatever the dates are. I've now forgotten, but anyway, it's 2 weeks.
We're playing from the 19th of January.
How about the 18th of January?
Oh, I'll start on the 18th.
Yeah, do show up then too. 18th of January to the 4th of February.
And before you disappear, Joseph, I'm going to say, obviously, an enormous thank you, but I'm also going to say, and this might tantalize any listeners or anyone watches this, I will see you around the chocolate fountain to launch the festival.
Yes, no, we look forward to that.